Good evening.
How's everyone? I'm very happy to be here. I've been associating with Unitarians and Universalists and Unity people and Sufis. And I come from a Baha'i background. Some of you may have heard about Baha'is, which brings it all together like Unity, very similar to Unity. So I'm excited. No, I think, it seems to me that Sufism is equivalent to Unity in Christianity and Sufism in Islam. There are very many similarities that you'll see as we go through some of the poems of Rumi. Sufism and Rumi are in effect equivalent of mysticism in Islam. And mysticism in many faiths is very similar. My understanding is the word mystic comes from the word mythos, which is a Latin word. Do you know what that means, the word mythos? Basically, from what I understand, keeping quiet, keeping silent, and closing your eyes, which is the meditative. So Sufis consider themselves people who want to be in a meditative state and who want to be close to God and who want to connect to God. And so this is basically the path of Sufism, like many other religions. But more important than that, the path of Sufism, very similar to Unity, is the path of harmony, the path of oneness. The path of there's one God, there's one race, which is the human race, and there's one religion, which has been revealed to man through time. Amen. Which I think is basically your concept and the concept of Baha'is. With some minor variations, and those variations, it seems to me, is because of our human limitation. The more we connect to God, the more those differences would dissipate. And we see ourselves connected to that master of the universe. I wanted to say a few words about the time frame of Rumi before I start reading and my friend Jahangir will start playing. Maybe Jahangir would like to come sit with us and start off with whatever instrument he has. The time frame was 13th century, Middle East. Now the turmoil that you see today in the Middle East, that was basically the same kind of turmoil back then. Perhaps, except for what we see today, the past 20, 30 years, what's happening, this clash of old and new, the clash of prejudice and superstition and intolerance and division was also happening back then. But the actors back then, you may know, were Mongols and Genghis Khan from the east, and a little before that, Crusaders from the west. The Crusaders had come to purify the east from Muslims and Jews, and Genghis Khan and his gang were invading to own everything and make it their way. And their system was that they would attack different cities, and when they got close to the city, they gave people a choice. Either you surrender or else. So if they surrendered, they would ask all the leaders of the city and all the soldiers to lie down. That was actually the order. And they would chop off their head. Ooh. That was when they were gentle. And then they would let the rest of the population live. If not, if they did not surrender, they would burn the whole city. So that was the 13th century. Baghdad and the city of Ray and many other cities in the entire Middle East were basically obliterated. They were leveled to the ground, and millions of people were killed in that fashion. So I'm giving you that background to tell you the contrast of Rumi. Rumi came from that environment of hostility and hatred and all of that, and wanted to transform. And his effect was amazing, that still continues until today. He, do you know where he came from? He came from today's Afghanistan, another place of Turma, the city of Balkh. And as these Mongols were invading, he and his family were trying to escape that route, and they came through the current Iran, and then they stayed in Baghdad for a while. You know, all the major universities, the few universities we had, were mainly Middle East back then. Baghdad and Samarkand and Damascus and a few other places. There were 5 universities. And they were all in that area. And anyway, he was 18 when he got to that area that is now today's Turkey, the area called Konya. And still people from all across the globe, the more they know Rumi, they just want to say that, you know, this, I would want this to be our religion. The religion of poetry and unity and harmony. Now, Rumi, in addition to being a poet, he was a philosopher, he was a scientist, and more so, he was an artist. He could tell us in an art form all these difficult mystical concepts. So, because when I read poetry, I'll just give you that little background. And that was an island of stability, Konya. Right after Crusaders' invasion, and still the Mongols were invading different areas. But that was an area of stability, and people were flooding, Jews and Christians and Muslims. And you will come across a word called Gabr. Have you heard of Gabr at all? Gabr is another word for Zoroastrian. And the Persians were primarily Zoroastrian. That's also among this family of religions. They basically have 3 main concepts, Zoroastrians. Good thoughts, good deeds, what's the third one? And good manners. He says, that's our religion. Good thoughts, good deeds, and good manners. The rest is secondary. And so they try to emphasize these 3 things in religion. And here, in that island of stability, was Rumi. And Rumi was, by then, was a philosopher, was a teacher, and he had a congregation. Now, I have to tell you this story too before. And this story before I started reading poems. That he was quite a confident professor back then. And what he did, he was giving his lectures. He was very confident of himself. And one day he saw somebody who was sitting there who looked like a beggar, with worn-out clothes, and sitting back there in the corner. And there were hundreds of students who were there, and he was lecturing. So at the lecture, he saw that man in the corner who was there for the first time. He went to him and he says, what did you think of my lecture? And he said, not much. And he said, what do you mean, what not? I didn't think much of it. Why not? He says, should I tell you? He says, go ahead. He says, you were arrogant, you were too full of yourself, or too confident you think you are, and all that. Calm down, slow down. Listen to your heart. Don't think so much through your head only. He said these things. Rumi had not said a poem until then. He was 37. That was the beginning of his transformation. Rumi was transformed from the head to the heart. And that was the beginning of his writing poems, and he absolutely loved that man. Many of you have heard of him. Shams Tabrizi. He absolutely adored Shams Tabrizi. And every day he would say a poem, a lot of it in the praise of this man, but then gradually connecting to God and connecting to this idea of detachment and humility and being calm in a meditative, prayerful spirit. And that gave him all the inspiration that he wanted. Now, in Persian language, he's of course a beautiful poet, a wonderful poet. But there are other poets that you may know of, you may not know of, such as Hafez and Attar and Sana'i and Sa'di, who are perhaps from a poetic point of view, who are more eloquent, many Persians would say. But Rumi was more artistic. He was more articulate. He would get a concept and he would put it in like a painting. And he would talk to us. Once, the secret of secrets would open to you. The face of the unknown hidden behind the universe would appear in the mirror of your perception. Detachment, humility, not being arrogant. That's the beginning of knowing God. That's the beginning of seeing God in ourselves. You know, Rumi was introduced to the West by Edward Brown. Had anyone heard of Professor Edward Brown? In 1880s, when this scholar from England came to the Middle East, and primarily to Iran, for one major purpose: to understand what these Baha'is are. That was more or less the beginning of the Baha'i Faith, more or less concurrent with the appearance of unity in the West. So that's why we are sisters and brothers in terms of that connection of Baha'is and unity movement. And in that process, he came across Rumi and Sufism and fell in love with that too. And he was the first translator of Rumi poetry. And then comes Nicholson and a few others until we come to Coleman Barks, who was a professor at the University of Georgia in translation of a lot of these poems. A lot of these poems we read, and there's a lot of love in it, and we are infatuated with the love of a man and a woman, a man and a man, and a woman and a woman, which is wonderful, which is what it should be. But a lot of it in his writings is that love together with love of the Master of the Universe. So I'll read this one and think of how you make this connection between all of them. I think this is one of his most beautiful love poems. From the beginning of my life, I have been looking for your face. But today I've seen it. Today I've seen the charm, the beauty, the unfathomable grace of the face that I was looking for. Today I found you. And those who laughed and scorned me yesterday are sorry that they were not looking as I did. And bewildered by the magnificence of your beauty and wish to see you with 100 eyes. I'm ashamed to call this love human, and afraid of God to call it divine. Your fragrant breath, like the morning breeze, has come to the stillness of the garden. I have become your sunshine and also your shadow. My soul is screaming in ecstasy. Every fiber of my being is in love with you. Your effulgence has lit a fire in my heart, and you have made radiant for me the earth and the sky. My arrow of love has arrived at the target. I'm in the house of mercy, and my heart is a place of prayer. Congregation gradually became 10,000 people. And these 10,000 congregation that he had included Jews and Christians and Muslims and Zoroastrians. So he was trying to redefine the concept of religion, our vision of God, and our vision of how these religions are intertwined. So listen to this one, where he explains in 5 lines the notion of God. Listen to this one carefully. How shall a man know God? How shall a man know God? Not by senses, for he is immaterial. Not by intellect, for he is unthinkable. Not by philosophy, for it sees double. But rather through the wind of his soul, when he succeeds in self-purification, through prayers, meditation, service, and godly living. For this congregation of Jews and Muslims and Zoroastrians and Christians, was trying to bring them all together. And he said, "What is to be done, O people? For I do not recognize myself. I'm neither Christian or Jew, nor Gab nor Muslim." He was trying to bring all these fighting nations together. I'm not of the east or of the west, nor of the land, nor of the sea. I'm not of nature's mint, nor of the circling heavens. I'm not of India, nor of China, nor of Bulgaria, nor of Samarkand. I'm not of the kingdom of Iraq, nor of the country of Khorasan. My place is the placeless. My trace is the traceless. It's neither body or soul, for I belong to the soul of the beloved. I have put duality aside. I have seen that the two worlds are one. One I seek, one I know, one I see, one I call. So his love was a love which was intertwined with the love of the Master of the Universe and love of his fellow man and love of the manifestations of God who have revealed the same truth through time, but progressively revealed as we become more mature to be able to absorb more. And that, by the way, is the main concept of Baha'is, progressive revelations. It's the same God that reveals more of himself to us as we can understand more. In the orchard and rose garden, I long to see your face. In the taste of sweetness, I long to kiss your lips. In the shadows of passion, I long for your love. O supreme lover, let me leave aside my worries. The flowers are blooming with the exaltation of your spirit. I long to escape the prison of ego and lose myself in the mountains and the desert. I'm sick of mortal kings. I long to see your light. You are the essence of the essence, the intoxication of love. I long to sing your praises, but stand mute with the agony of wishing in my heart. I said that Rumi was, in addition to being a philosopher and a poet, he was an artist. And that's what he says in one of his poems. He said, in your light, in the light of this oneness, in the light of knowing God, in your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. You dance inside my chest when no one sees you. But sometimes I do. And that sight becomes this art. While it was 19th century, I think it was, when Charles Darwin discovered what? The concept of evolution, right? Let's see what back then in 13th century, what what Rumi thought of evolution. He thought that according to the will of the organism, to the will of organism to live, and then the organism brings life to a higher state. But listen to his words, see how he has explained it. See what you think. The story of evolution in the 13th century. He says, I died as a mineral and became plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was a man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God doth perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return. Listen, that concept of everything is from God, and to God we shall return. What Baha'u'llah, the founder of Baha'i Faith, explains in one of his works called The Seven Valleys, that we go in this life through 7 stages. If you're aware of it, we start with search and love, and he goes through all these valleys. But the last valley is the valley of absolute nothingness. When you become like a speck of dust, like a drop of water in the ocean of his mercy. Slightly different way, this idea of dying from self and connecting to God. He says there's a way of breathing that is a shame and suffocation. And there's another way of expiring, a love breath that lets you open infinitely. Is burning with the joy of the unknown. My heart is expanding 1,000-fold. Every cell taking wings flies about the world. All seek separately the many faces of my beloved. From the Baha'i perspective, God is the unknowable essence. But we can know him through virtues of compassion, of justice, of purity, of nobility. And we can see this in ourselves. So when that happens, we see God in one another. And there'll be peace on earth as it is in heaven. as Jesus has told us. We cannot and we should not wait for him to come on the clouds, but we should internalize these teachings, now put in poetry in this format, and then there'll be peace on earth. So let me repeat just one of these poems. I don't know if you took it to heart. I mean, I'm sure you took it to heart, but which one of those you sort of remember? That's probably the one that you stuck with you a little bit more. How shall a man know God? Not by senses, for he is immaterial. Not by intellect, for he is unthinkable. Not by philosophy, so he is double. All of that is search in vain. It leads us to atheism. But rather through the wind of his soul, when he succeeds in self-purification, through prayers, meditation, service, and godly living. And maybe a little yoga. They probably didn't do yoga back then, I don't know. So let me end, while my friend would play for another 10 minutes, I hope, with this passage. I think he was in his mid-60s when he passed away, around 1270 or so. And he says, when you see my funeral, don't say what a separation. It is time for me to visit and meet the beloved. Since you have seen my descent, then do see my rising. Why complain about the setting of the moon and the sun? Which seed that went under the earth failed to grow up again? For my funeral, call the drummers, timbal beaters, and tambourine players. March toward my grave, dancing, thus happy, gay, intoxicated, with hands clapping, so that people would know that the friends of God go happy and smiling toward the place of meeting. So let me conclude with two passages. One, everything we read. And by the way, he composed about 75,000 verses of poetry in the course of 30 years, which comes to about 10,000 poems, which is collected in 7 volumes of each one about 1,000 pages. That's the amount of inspiration that he got. All of them about different aspects of love, but in this beautiful tapestry of art. With all that said, he says the ultimate achievement of my life is summed up in 3 phrases. I'll say this in Persian also. That's a short, so you get a glimpse of Persian language. He says, "Hausel omram se sukhan bish nist. Kham budam, pukhte shudam, sukh." The ultimate result of my life is summed up in this. I was raw, I matured, I was annihilated. Became nothing. And you may become nothing, you join the master of the universe. And let me then also say something also from my heart. A passage from the writings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of Baha'i Faith, who, by the way, in the 19th century, he was put in prison and banishment in 1852 and spent the rest of his life in exile, banishment, and imprisonment until he died in 1892 in Akka, today's Israel. With a lot of suffering and torture and all that. And he says, "You're all the fruits of one tree. You're all the fruits and branches of one tree. You're the flowers of one garden. This span of the earth is one country and mankind its citizens."